They say cities never sleep. But what happens when they do? When entire neighborhoods go silent? When skyscrapers stand empty? And when the hum of life fades into an eerie quiet? This isn't some dystopian sci-fi movie. It's happening right now across America. Cities are shrinking, and it's not just one or two. It's an entire wave of urban decline sweeping the nation. But why? And more importantly, is there a way back? If we don't address these warning signs, the consequences could reshape the American landscape for generations to come. And if you think this doesn't affect you, think again, because what's happening in these cities today could be a glimpse into the future of urban life everywhere. It wasn't that long ago that cities like Detroit, Cleveland, and St. Louis were booming. They were industrial powerhouses, economic giants, and symbols of the American dream. Fast forward to today, and parts of these cities resemble ghost towns, boarded-up houses, crumbling infrastructure, and empty streets where life once thrived. But this isn't just about abandoned buildings. The decline of American cities is a complex story of economic shifts, failed policies, and a changing world. Today, we're breaking down why cities are shrinking, who's leaving, and what the future looks like. And trust me, the truth is way more unsettling than you might think. It's not just about jobs or crime, it's about something deeper, something that affects every one of us, whether we live in a big city or a small town. And the more we understand these forces, the better equipped we'll be to shape the cities of tomorrow before it's too late. Because once a city starts to fall apart, the ripple effects can be felt far beyond its borders. This isn't just about lost tax revenue or economic decline. It's about the very fabric of American life coming undone. At first glance, the idea of a shrinking city sounds bizarre. We're used to hearing about cities growing, skyscrapers going up, tech hubs expanding, and new developments bringing in thousands of people. But across the U.S., the opposite is happening. From the Rust Belt to the Midwest, populations are plummeting, and once thriving urban centers are struggling to survive. Take Detroit, for example. In 1950, it was America's fourth largest city, home to nearly 2 million people. Today, that number has dropped to just over 600,000. Whole neighborhoods have vanished. Schools have closed, businesses have left, and Detroit isn't alone. Cities like St. Louis, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh are all following a similar pattern. This isn't just an economic problem, it's a cultural one. The vibrancy, innovation, and community that once defined these cities are being replaced by uncertainty and decay. When a city loses its people, it loses more than just numbers. It loses its heart. And that decline isn't just a matter of abandoned buildings. It's about lost traditions, struggling schools, and entire communities disappearing. The impact of this decline extends far beyond the city limits. It affects local economies, housing markets, and even the mental health of residents who feel trapped in a place that's slowly withering away. But why is this happening? What's causing this mass exodus? And what can be done to stop it? There isn't just one reason. It's a cocktail of economic, social, and political factors that have collided to create a perfect storm of urban decline. Let's break them down. For decades, cities like Detroit and Cleveland thrived because of manufacturing. They built America's cars, steel, and machinery. But as globalization took hold and factories moved overseas, thousands of jobs disappeared overnight. When the jobs left, the people followed. Families packed up and moved to places with better economic opportunities, leaving behind a city struggling to survive. And it wasn't just blue-collar workers who left. Business owners, entrepreneurs, and even white-collar professionals started looking elsewhere. Once a city's economy starts shrinking, the domino effect is unstoppable. And this isn't just about factory jobs. Think about the small businesses, schools, and service industries that depended on those manufacturing workers to survive. The 1950s and 60s saw a huge migration of middle-class families out of cities and into the suburbs. This wasn't just about wanting a white picket fence. It was fueled by policies that made suburban living more attractive. The rise of highways, government-backed mortgages, and racial segregation all played a role in draining cities of their tax base. With wealthier residents leaving, cities were left with fewer resources, declining schools, and crumbling infrastructure. This created a vicious cycle. Once a city started shrinking, it became even harder to attract new residents. And over time, cities became more reliant on government assistance, which only deepened the economic crisis. In some cases, entire neighborhoods were abandoned, left as eerie reminders of what once was. As cities lost jobs and tax revenue, crime often surged. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, cities like Detroit, Baltimore, and St. Louis became notorious for their high crime rates. Even as crime has decreased in recent years, the perception remains, driving more people to leave for safer suburban or rural areas. But it's not just about actual crime rates. It's about how people feel about safety. If a city has a reputation for being dangerous, even if crime numbers are improving, people hesitate to move back. And with fewer people willing to take the risk, cities struggle to regain their population. This fear, whether justified or not, plays a massive role in the future of these urban areas. When people leave a city in droves, they don't just take their tax dollars, they leave behind homes, businesses, and infrastructure that can't sustain itself. With fewer people paying into the system, cities fall into disrepair, schools close, roads deteriorate, and basic services become unreliable. Once a neighborhood starts to decline, it becomes less attractive to new residents, and the cycle of abandonment continues. And the longer this goes on, the harder it is to reverse. Some cities have tried to demolish abandoned buildings to prevent crime and blight, but without new investment, these efforts can only go so far. The pandemic changed everything. Remote work allowed people to ditch expensive cities and move to smaller towns or rural areas. No longer tied to an office, many professionals fled high-cost urban centers for cheaper housing, better quality of life, and more space. This has left many cities struggling to reinvent themselves in a world where work no longer requires a commute. Some have adapted, turning empty office buildings into apartments, while others are still figuring out how to bring people back. If this trend continues, we could see a new wave of urban ghost towns, places that were once booming economic centers but are now abandoned shells of their former selves. The consequences? Fewer job opportunities, higher poverty rates, increased crime in struggling areas, collapsing infrastructure, widening economic inequality. And here's the scariest part. Once a city reaches a tipping point, reversing the damage becomes nearly impossible. But here's the thing, this isn't inevitable. Cities have bounced back before, and some are already finding ways to reverse their decline. So is there hope? Absolutely. Cities that adapt, innovate, and invest in their communities can turn things around. Look at Pittsburgh. It transformed from a steel town into a hub for tech and education. Affordable housing initiatives, making cities livable for more people, can attract a new wave of residents. Urban farming, eco-friendly development, and walkable communities can make cities more attractive. Abandoned properties or vacant lots can be converted into green spaces for retiring seniors migrating from other places. Let's reinvestment in public transit and safety. A city that's easy to navigate and safe to live in will always attract people. The future of American cities isn't written in stone, but if we ignore the warning signs, we could see more urban centers fade into history. The good news, we still have time to change course. The real question is, will we? If you want to see how other cities are fighting back, check out this next video because the battle to save urban America is just getting started.